All right, let's call to order the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, February 2nd, 2023. If we can start with roll call.
Chair Dennison,
Here.
Vice Chair Hutt,
Here.
Commissioner Pefsner,
Here.
Commissioner Simcock,
Here.
Commissioner Yu.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum for this meeting.
Thank you. I'm looking for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. We have two sets of minutes. Approval of the December 1st, 2022 meeting and January 19th, 2023 meeting.
I reviewed both and don't have any comments. They look good to me.
Anybody else have any comments? That'd be you.
Yeah. Oh, was it me the only one? Oh, yeah, you.
I was not here, so.
Yeah.
Nope, was not here.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, then I will accept a motion to approve. Let's do them separately because they're going to have different votes. December 1st, 2022.
So moved.
And second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, carries 3-2 with abstentions from Commissioners Simcock and you. Let's do the meeting minutes for January 19th, 2023.
I move to approve as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 4-0-1 with an abstention from Commissioner Yu. We will not be having a council liaison report. Councilmember Lowe is at another city function tonight, I believe city government or something. Next up is community input. At this time, any person may address the Planning Commission concerning an item that is not on the agenda. The Commission welcomes your attendance and participation. When addressing the Commission, please begin by providing your name and address for the record. Please keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes to assure an orderly and timely meeting. Would anybody like to come before us to speak on something not on tonight's agenda? Nope. Going once, twice. Moving on. First up will be a public hearing for Design Review Permit 22-05, requesting to demolish and rebuild the existing single-family dwelling and detached ancillary structure for a 3,949 square foot dwelling and 600 square foot detached garage. Let's start with the disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts.
I went by the site. I didn't speak with anybody. I also went by the site last time we looked at a different project on this same parcel.
I just drove by. I didn't make any comment.
I drove by also.
Yep, same here. All right, does city staff have a presentation for us?
Yes, staff have a PowerPoint presentation delivered by Associate Planner Wolf.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission. Tonight, the Commission will be reviewing the Design Review Permit 2205 for 193 Oak Meadow Road. The applicant is requesting to construct a single-family residence, including a detached 3-car garage, measuring a total of 4,549 square feet in gross floor area. Pursuant to Code Section 1720.027, the allowable gross floor area structures that exceed 3,500 square feet on lots sized 11,000 square feet or greater shall be subject to the granting of a design review permit. And the project also qualifies for CEQA categorical exemption classes 1 and 3. The project is located on Oak Meadow Road. Here I have pictured a satellite image. Oak Meadow Road is stemming off of Orange Grove Avenue and is located between Mountain Trail Avenue and South Cannon Avenue. You can also see that it is in proximity of East Bonita and Lowell Avenue. This is in the southeast quadrant of the city. The property is designated for residential low density. It's zoned for 1-family residential. It has a lot size of 19,758 square feet. It is an interior lot and its current construction year date is 1951. Here are some photographs of the existing residence. On the top left, you see the front of the house. Moving to the top right is the back, then the side on the north, and the side on the south. You can see that this is a ranch-style home in need of a lot of love and care. You can see that also on the detached garage, which also has a workshop in it. On the top left is the front of the garage. Top right is the back. And the bottom is the side, and then the backyard area where we see a coast live oak tree. And then the following slides are pictures and photos of the neighborhood along Oak Meadow and extending down to Orange Grove Avenue. So we can see from a generic standpoint that these are all quite large lots that all have quite large residences. Moving on more, and you can see here Orange Grove. You can see as viewed from Oak Meadow, also as viewed from Orange Grove. And then finishing at the other end of Orange Grove and Oak Meadow corner, there is a two-story house. So the existing site plan has a single-family residence that you can see shaded with the building footprint here on the right-hand side of the slide near the eastern portion of the property. And the detached three-car garage with workshop is at the rear of the property at the north and west end. There's also a pool and spa, and you can also see that there are 4 protected trees. 3 of them are coast live oak, and 1 of them is a parkway jacaranda. The proposed site plan extends that existing building footprint out. The new footprint would be shaded here in a lavender color, as well as with the detached 3-car garage. You see its new footprint shading is actually reduced from its existing. You can see that the coast live oak would be impacted by the construction of this project. It is going to be protected in place in accordance with an arborist report with mitigation measures included. And here we have the vicinity and neighborhood analysis. So a neighborhood analysis was done on the properties within a 300-foot radius, analyzing the habitable and accessible floor areas for each property according to the LA County Assessor's Office. And this number has been adjusted to amount to the accessible area proposed by the project, which is about 3,900 square feet. And that does land at number 2, ranking number 2, above the average and median of the top third of properties within the 300-foot radius. Here's a project summary of the code compliance. And as you can see, the project does meet all code requirements for the R1 code, as well as for parking and general development standards. I just want to note too here that the lot size of 19,758 square feet is derived from a conversion of the acreage that is stated at 0.4536 acres. That's a number provided by the LA County Assessor's Office. And I've also differentiated the setbacks here for the primary structure and the detached garage. So I guess more notably too is that the front yard setback remains existing. The sides are exceeding what's required by providing an extra 1.5 feet on the north side. And the rear is quite obviously meeting the requirement. The rear, though, applies more to the detached structure, and it does show that the rear setback at 39'6" proposed meets a 3-foot setback requirement for a 600 square foot garage. More on the 600 square foot garage of 3 spaces. When the application was submitted, the code requirement was for three-car garage of 600 square feet, measuring more specifically in the code at 20 feet by 30 feet. And that meets the requirement as it exists today.
And so on the neighborhood analysis, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just a minor question. So we're not including the garage, right, because that's not the way the county does it. Do we have an idea on how many of the other comparable houses have three-car garages as opposed to two-car garages?
I do not, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
Okay, so the next slide is the roof plan. And the project is oriented so that north faces the right side of the slide, so that the front of the structure is on the bottom of the slide. And I have represented with a dashed line the line of the exterior wall of the ground floor. Also of note is this symbology here. This is supposed to be the trellis opening for the roof, so it wouldn't be covered. And this opening is for the purpose of a trash enclosure on the north side of the property. As you can see, roof plans are generally shed and gabled front to back, with another gable here at the front and large prominent sheds towards the back. Moving on to the first floor plan. Again, the entrance here, you can see that the porch faces the front, and through a foyer there are 4 bedrooms, a gym, a great room, a family room, a kitchen, and a laundry room. The enclosed area comprises 3,730.5 square feet. The covered patio at the rear comprises 218.5 square feet. The front porch is covered, but its floor area is excluded from the gross floor area calculation. Here towards the center, there are access points to a basement through elevator and stairway. Moving on to that basement, this is the enclosed area here, and that you may have noticed that there are 2 light wells here that are 2.8 feet above the basement floor level. And within the basement there is a rec room, a storage, powder room, media room, study, and another bathroom. And again, those access points are here at the center of that space, with an elevator and a stairway up back to the first floor. The dashed line surrounding is representing the building line of the first floor. Moving on to section elevations. On the top left, first, overall, the section elevations demonstrate that the basement is fully subterranean. The highest floor-to-ceiling measure is found on the top left section. It measures 15 feet and 11 inches. And this is within the dining and great room adjacent to the kitchen area. Attic spaces are framed with custom truss systems. The tallest attic space height is 7 feet and 1.5 inches. You can see that on the lower left section area. The top left section reveals that there is a backlight area behind the window above the covered entry. You can see that on the top left section again. Moving on to building elevations. Height measured from the lowest point of grade to highest point of the building is 24 feet and 6 inches. However, height according to the zoning code requirement measures a consistent with the development standard definition for height that's from lowest point of grade to the first third up the roof pitch. That height measures 17 feet 6 inches. The takeoff point you see on the slide here does measure 14 feet 8 inches, but it is not taken from the lowest point of grade, so the adjustment has been made to 17 feet 6 inches from the lowest point. The front facade showcases symmetrical, massing, evenly spaced fenestration and a central entryway. Front gabled, double-framed walls on either side of the front porch feature a window with decorative eyebrow detailing and wrought iron fencing surrounding the light wells below both. And that would be here on the slide on the top elevation on these subordinate front gable ends. Windows for venting are also featured just below the peaks of the larger gables, here and here. And as you can see, the rear elevation mimics the form and massing of the front, with prominent front gables. And the fenestration here is a bit more utilitarian, also characteristic of a farmhouse style. Moving on to the side elevations, on the top is the south side elevation. This is the 10-foot setback side. You can see it primarily just features a shed roof. This is the shed side of the pitched roof, front and back gable. Below that is the north elevation. This is the 23-foot setback elevation. And here you can see the opening trellis for the trash enclosure. Behind that, a recessed wall, and to the side, a wing wall. And then beyond that would be the rear porch. And briefly is the garage elevations. This is very simple building. At the front, there are 2 bays for vehicles. One is a single car and the other is a double car bay. Sections, again, very simple. And this slide is the representative of the reference inspiration. And I wanted to demonstrate how this reference inspiration has been modified to meet the design you see before you today. The first of that being a reduction of these roof pitches from a 45-degree angle to a 9/12 pitch. These are the roof pitches on both sides. The next being an added variety to the roof material rather than having a standing seam metal roof for the entire roof. The front portion of the roofs are the standing seam for an accented look, as well as the shed piece below. And the remainder of the roof is a composition shingle. Furthermore, form and massing has been narrowed. As you can see, this is a very wide building, and the elevations we saw earlier are a bit narrowed. A narrowing of the porch results from that. You may notice that this reference image has a very wide porch. The proposal you see before you tonight has only 2 posts for supporting. Furthermore, there has been added variety to the siding material that I'll go over in the next slide. And this variety occurs on all highlighted portions of this elevation. So here we have a colored rendering of the proposed elevation. The composition shingle comprises a majority of the roof area, and it is a charcoal color. For the accent piece, there is a red metal roofing in coal black, and this covers that front porch area, both on the roof portions facing the front and those roof portions just above, facing the sides and above, as well as on the shed portion. The primary siding material is an exterior board and batten siding in a white dove color. This material extends through the sides on the rear and on the other side, wrapping and ending at the north side. The featured smaller gables are of a brick facing in a cream color. And then the front porch area walls and the wall above that is an exterior horizontal siding in white dove. Here's just a cleaned up version of that colored elevation. And here are some 3D models of that, just for better picture of what is going on all of these elevations. You can see that the front porch is deeply recessed, and the form above that is a bit more prominent and in line with the porch supports. And you can also see that the prominent front and back gables are one of the main features of this home. And when first submitted, the design included largely dominant side gables, of which the southern gable end projected into the required angle plane. Staff's review and discussions with the applicant resulted in various modifications to the first submittal, which, as seen on this slide, employs a front and back gable, resulting in roofs shedding towards the side, reducing its overall dominance and impact on views for neighbors. So you can see the first submittal has very prominent side gables here, and a very awkward rear elevation with cutouts of the roof that had been modified further to get the gable on the side here. I'm sorry, not the gable, the shed on the side, and get front and back gables. However, in this iteration, staff had a concern with the height and dominance of this front piece, as well as its how it resolves the back. It's a bit awkward, and how it resolves on the side, it seems imbalanced. Today's submittal resolves that balance and reduces that massing on the front, lowering it by a few feet. For approval of a design review permit, the following findings must be made by the Planning Commission. The first finding is that the use of the property does remain single-family residential. It is consistent with the general plan land use for low-density residential and is fully compliant with the zoning code as demonstrated by the project summary. The second finding is that the use, possession, and enjoyment for surrounding neighbors will not be unreasonably impacted since the project maintains the same use as the single-family residence and further reduces intensity by eliminating the existing workshop. Following the recommendations of arborist Craig Crotty, will ensure that the preservation of all existing protected trees, including the coast live oak at the southern corner of the building footprint and the parkway jacaranda near the driveway remain in place. The third finding is that in terms of bulk, scale, mass, and siding, the proposed project occupies only 23% of the lot. It is sited within the center of the lot and is in very similar location to the existing residence, where the expansions primarily take place at the rear of the property, not visible from public view. Furthermore, the neighborhood is primarily comprised of large homes on large lots, and the proposed project fits well within this character. Thus, the proposed project demonstrates the least disruption to the development patterns of its neighborhood. The fourth finding. The proposed project differs from the original ranch style. Ranch style homes are common throughout the city and were typical in tract developments. The farmhouse style proposed is a single-story structure which will maintain the same front yard setback that currently exists. This style will lend to the village atmosphere by strengthening its eclectic nature of differing styles throughout the neighborhood. The fifth finding, that the proposed project is single-story, will maintain a generous side yard setback on both north and south sides. The roof being pitched away from the sides being well behind the required angle plane will lend to the reduced interference on public views for neighbors. Thus, the public views nor privacy of views of the neighbors will be unreasonably impacted. Finding 6, that the elevations demonstrate that the project utilizes consistent architectural details. The material and color board, three-dimensional renderings, and colored elevation will further demonstrate that the project will employ consistent and coherent design through architectural details characteristic of its farmhouse style. This proposed project is not seeking relief from development standards. And finally, finding 8, because the project does exceed 3,500 square feet, the first point on finding 8, as shown by the evolution of the initial design, the applicant has demonstrated that the architecture is not a generic design. Instead, the applicant utilizes inspiration of a generic design and modified it in response to the site as well as the zoning development standards and general plan objective and policies, demonstrating responsiveness to the goals of the greater community. This property does not qualify for historic preservation since it was built in 1951. Next, that aside from the excavation required of the proposed project, the landscape elsewhere on site remains as it exists, maintained with its existing minimal natural landscaping. As a condition of approval, the oaks and parkway jacaranda will be protected in place in accordance with the arborist report. Thus, the landscape is preserved to the extent possible through the minimal grade changes outside the building footprint area. Next, that the proposed project utilizes existing building footprints to the greatest extent possible. The front yard setback will be maintained to maximize open space and preserve public and neighbor views. Next, that elements of the farmhouse style are characterized by front gabled roofs, clean lines, and accented front porch through the use of high-quality board and batten style siding materials, accented brick facing material, and accented horizontal siding material. Symmetrical massing, front gables, and fascia board placed on eaves throughout achieve a clean overall design. Thus, there is high-quality architectural details and building materials compatible with the farmhouse style. For the next part, the project employs standing seam metal roof, which provides additional efficiency in terms of insulating and passive cooling. Moreover, the construction of the proposed project will be subject to modern building codes, including California Green Code, where high-efficiency building elements are required to reduce the carbon footprint and impact on the greenhouse gas effect. While no landscaping is proposed as part of the project, the applicant has stated their intention to later include landscaping with water-saving features, which will be required to comply with Sierra Madre's water-efficient landscape ordinance. Tonight, the alternatives before the Planning Commission are to adopt Planning Commission Resolution 2305 as presented. This approves the request for design review permit, subject to conditions of approval. They may also adopt they may adopt Planning Commission resolution with modifications, or they may deny the request, directing staff to prepare Planning Commission resolution citing the reasons and findings for denial, or they may continue the public hearing and provide direction to staff and the applicant. Staff is recommending the adoption of Planning Commission Resolution 2305 as presented with conditions of approval. That concludes my presentation. The applicant is also here tonight. I'm open for questions as well as the applicant.
Are there any questions for staff?
Yeah, I have a couple general and then some specific ones. So you went through the design review findings, and I just want to make clear that unlike the project we had last time, which was multifamily, we can do the subjective design review and apply those findings. And in fact, we need to make those findings in order to approve the project. Okay. And then I noticed on the plans, I didn't see them stamped by an architect, and our code requires the plans to be stamped by an architect. I'm assuming these were submitted before that requirement?
Yes, thank you for the question. The application was submitted on March 21st. The code became effective shortly thereafter.
Okay. And then I'm a little confused on what the point of the trellis opening over the garage is, why that's not just regular roof as it was shown on the 3D renderings.
So because that is behind a recessed wall greater than 4 feet in depth, its area would be counted towards the gross floor area.
So the trellis is not counted, but if it were just a regular roof, it would be counted.
That's correct.
Okay. And then the highest height in the ceiling is 15 feet 11 inches. And what's the height in our code that we start counting
16.
a height is double?
Over 16 feet.
16. So it's 1 inch shy. Okay. That's my questions. Thanks.
I have some questions. So this is the first time this application has come to the Planning Commission. It looks like the other roof adjustments were done in a planning level, or was that here?
Yes, the iterations you saw in the earlier slides were all staff level comments.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Any questions for staff?
Just one, this isn't the house that was originally approved, I forgot how long ago, that was supposed, this is the mission style with the post and the driveway that was, is this the same property?
Yes, so about 4 years ago, the Planning Commission saw for the same property a proposal for a Spanish hacienda style home.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's why it looks familiar.
Yeah, didn't look familiar, I thought it was done.
Any questions for staff? All right, any questions for the applicant?
Yes.
All right, we do have some questions for the applicant.
You gonna come up? So- you guys tell me if these are off base or whatever it might be, so. Hi.
How you doing?
So the basement,
Yes.
just out of curiosity, why a basement and not a, let's say, two-story?
So two reasons. When we first bought the property, we met the neighbors and said hi, and one of the neighbors, first thing she said was, "You're not going to build a two-story, are you?" So we thought, out of respect for her. Second reason, and actually the main reason, in 2013, or no, I'm sorry, 2003, I built a Sunset Design house, and we built a basement, and I just fell in love with the idea. So this project is kind of our dream home, and ever since that Sunset Design house, I've always wanted one. So this is where we plan on staying and
Okay.
raising the kids.
That's where you're gonna hide out when the zombie apocalypse happens?
Yeah, or watch movies when it's
When our kids become teenagers.
Okay, gotcha. Let's see. So, is it fair to say that the inspiration image that you had in the, I think it was one of the original slides with the symmetrical, all of that. So that was sort of the launching point for the design of the house. Is
Exactly.
that correct? Okay. Got it.
That we felt was appropriate for our neighborhood too, because we did have other ideas that we wanted to kind of go in a different direction, but based on our neighborhood,
Mhm.
it just looked like the most fitting design.
Okay. Okay. I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Questions for the applicant?
No.
Questions for the applicant?
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we will take public comment on this agendized item.
Okay, I'm probably the one and only from our street. Anyway, my name is Chris Paulson and I live at 161 Oak Meadow Road. Since I moved up to Sierra Madre in 1986, we have had over the years, probably close to 25 years, of block parties on our street, and it takes place at Christmas time. My wife was asking the neighbors, have you ever had any block parties on this street? And they said no. He said, we're going to have it. So we started out with 3 homes for close to 25 years. And it's like one big family. Our street is just we all get along, and I'm sure I have the backing of a lot of my neighbors. They're not here tonight, but anyway, so I like the project. I'm a former builder myself, and the basement I think is a great idea, because sometimes when you get up, then you have a tile roof and it's exposed to earthquakes. Here you are down under, and you don't. They'll probably have to over excavate to get the footprint of the building anyway. At least I had to do it when I built. You have to go down to bedrock, and then so here they just have to take away the dirt. And I'm sure somebody in the neighborhood can use good Sierra Madre dirt. It's hard. I hate to see it go to waste, but I'm sure it'll be used somewhere. Anyway, so I'm all for the project, and I like the design of the house. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Hearing none, we will bring it back to the Planning Commission. Who would like to start off?
You want me to go? I got a list. So,
Go ahead.
all right. So these are my thoughts as an architect when I see a project like this, and I'm saying it to you to be constructive and to just give you my opinion on what I do on a daily basis, my job, okay? So, first thing is the basement location. Concerns me a little bit. I think maybe try to take a look at it, especially having the light wells on the front yard side of it. Consider maybe putting them in the back, maybe where you're not having just people that can just hop in and maybe break into your place or something on the lower level. But also, as a safety precaution, maybe even consider putting in a second staircase that comes out of there, maybe in the backyard. Just because the only way in is in the center of the house, and if anything happens within it, everyone's gonna be trapped except for the light wells that are they're 5 feet windows, right? So it's gonna be much harder to get out of those. So maybe even for consideration of just ease of getting down there, maybe you're having a party back there, you can just go directly into it. So maybe consider that, pushing the footprint in the back. The elevations, and that's the reason I was asking you about your inspiration image. I think the front actually looks really nice. I think you have a lot of contrasting elements. You know, you've really shaped it well. The only issue that I have is once you start walking around the place, it doesn't feel like the same house. There's no sort of attention to detail that happens at the front that you're not carrying all the way around. And it almost starts to look almost like just like an apartment building or something in the backside, where the front is really nice, right? And you spend sort of all that money, but you're building a three-dimensional house. And so once you get back there, consider maybe trying to do something to the other sides that has the same appeal that you have in the front, right? The roof layout. I feel like you should maybe take another look at it, because I know that you're sort of taking that front elevation that you have from the inspirational images, and you're just kind of projecting that back and then trying to create that roof line. But there's a lot of elements that are just kind of clashing, and you're creating this huge roof element that might work in the front, but then the back, it's adding to the fact that it's looking very plain on the other side. I was looking at your sections, and I know you don't want to go to a two-story building, but the height of this thing is almost like a two-story building. It almost would be nicer to have a two-story element to kind of anchor this thing, to give it some hierarchy on the elevation. And so, because if you look at the sections, you have all this attic space. And I think at the height, it's about 7 feet or something in the attic. I mean, that's a lot of money you're spending for attic space. And so it's still creating this really big sort of inflated kind of building, and just you're spending all that money in the attic. And so I think there's a better way of doing the roof to kind of lower that volume and not have to pay for that space. And at the front, I mean, you can start seeing where the valleys of the roof start coming together. It's going to be a problem. I think there's going to be some potential leaking happening at those locations as well. So take a look at that. And it happens where the roof lines are coming down and the valley in the back, and then you have the pop-up right there, right? And so the valleys are kind of coming right into the wall area. So take a look at that. And some of the issues are actually coming from the fact that this house is big square, right? And so whenever you're designing a house with a footprint that's a big square, you have this big middle area that's not gonna get any light. And it's also gonna be much harder to roof, because anything you're starting off at the lowest point, it has to gradually get up to the middle. And if that middle is really big, then you're gonna end up with the big, top piece in the middle. Maybe take a look at somehow cutting away at the square. I mean, a lot of the designs you see, especially in the early California houses, was like this idea of the courtyard, or smaller sort of buildings that are surrounding an area instead of a big block, right? And there's reasons why they do that, so they can get natural light into all those spaces without having a big, massive house that's square and nothing in the middle, right? So maybe consider something like that. I'll end it there. So.
Okay. I'll go. Well, I want to thank the applicant for taking this project on. We did see this a few years ago, and I think there's a lot of potential here. And I do like the inspirational design, and I think there's a lot of possibility there. I think the design of the house as is not quite there yet, and I think we've heard some other suggestions. A couple of things to think about is I think this house is it's 2 square feet under the limit, which is technically compliant, but there's a lot of features in it that are going to show bigger than the square footage. And so I have problems making the findings about overpowering the neighbors, such as findings 3 and 4. I think if you look at some of the features in it that work like that, there's this back light area behind the window that looks like a second story, but it's not counted. There's this trellis over the garage that's open, so it's not counted. There's a 15-foot, 11-inch height that if we're 1 inch more would be counted double. On the ground floor, or the only floor, even though the attic has a lot of feel of second story, you've got a plate height of 10 feet 7 inches in places, which is just really high. And I think, so if you could think about, getting rid of the trellis, really thinking about, you know, calculating those with honest square footage, take the plate heights down, think about some of those ways to reduce some of the size. I think the basement concept is great. I'm not sure exactly on the placement. I defer to the architect on that. But yeah, I'd love to have a media room. I think that would be a really handy thing. So, you know, to the extent there's programmatic stuff that's upstairs you could bring down, you know, I think that would be wonderful. I also think that if you look at the inspirational design in the front compared to the elevation here, there's a lot more materials on the front on this one than there are on the inspirational. But then when you go to the other elevations, they don't follow. And I think one is too many and the other is too few. You got to pick which way you want to go and sort of bring it all the way around. And I think, to me, the inspirational design with a cleaner front would probably help you to wrap that design all the way around, which would help us with finding 6. Let's see. Also, you know, we need to make a finding 8F that the building is sustainable, including water-saving features. And I think we really need to see a preliminary landscape plan. I think that's one of the standard submission parts of the submission. And we need to look at that, and especially in comparison to the inspirational design that had a big green lawn and big trees, which, you know, we don't have on the property. And so I think that would be helpful for us to tie it together. So those are my suggested areas of improvement.
Yeah, as a lot of my thoughts have been said, but I want to just say I think my problem is, yeah, the front. If I'm going to say that we have a coherent project-wide design, I like the front, but I have a hard time seeing that around the back, and that the roof in the back, I mean, it's not visible to the people in the front, but it is visible to some neighbors in the back and on the sides. And I think, you know, again, I'm not an architect, but I think that could be tweaked a little bit so maybe even everybody likes that design a little bit more, just some little bit more changes and more detail, really showing the cohesiveness of the farmhouse, because I like the farmhouse idea. I mean, I love the metal roofs. I know we're not doing it on the whole thing, but I do really like those. And yeah, I mean, that's my main thing on it.
The only thing I would add is, first of all, again, I'm glad somebody's taking this on, because I was very disappointed when I went by and I saw that. I thought there was going to be a mission-style home, because he argued vociferously about his posts and all that kind of stuff, and then it never got done. And I think we quibbled at about 1 foot of driveway, and that was about it, and it never came to fruition. I like the basement idea in that area, because we've suggested it up in the One Carter area. I haven't seen anybody take it on down here. That's obviously a very big expense. I think the problem with I love the front of the house. The only other comment is, and I don't know how it's going to come out, is that when we see box-style homes, because we faced this in another house that had a garage that came out the old Lopez place. There was this long wall on the side, so there wasn't any articulations. I like the fact that you put windows very minimally to accommodate the neighbors. You know, this whole thing, you know, like this looming, like you could have been a big patio or a balcony looking down on their yard. We've seen complaints about that. That's commendable, but I would like to see some articulations. Maybe you can match up what they were saying about trying to get this wide house with all this roofing, maybe articulated differently in the back. I don't know how that puts it, but that's my only. I like the rest of the elements. I like the copper and mixed shingle roof. That's, to me, is sort of, I don't know, cottagey like. That's even sort of country, which is a nice mix. And all the things you're doing, I think, are high quality, especially, you know, I mean, from all the articulations, all the work you spent on the articulations in the front, which gives a lot of curb appeal. So just, I think the other elements maybe can be worked on a little bit, but overall, I like the project.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's been said. I think findings 3 and 4 on the size and the bulk and massing in comparison to the neighborhood, I'm having a hard time finding that. I think that there's some great opportunities to reduce, the plate height is a slam dunk. Lowering the attic, the 8 feet of attic, nearly 8 feet of attic space in the front and creating more articulation there, even if it's, you don't lose 3 feet off the plate height in the back where you have the great room, having an articulation stepping up by losing some of that 8 feet of empty space in there might be a great way to kind of minimize the back. And as was mentioned, there's the letter of the codes were followed like to an inch, which I think is going to create it's going to read a lot bigger than just what that inch saves. And the trellis or the opening on the side over the trash area, those are ways to just sneak under, and I just think that it's not going to be consistent with the bulking and the massing of the neighborhood. Finding 6 and then 8A and 8E all have to do with the nature of what you have done up front, not continuing and being all the way through the project. Figuring out how to carry some of that, it's a little disjointed. If you were to walk up and not see the front and just see the side of the house or the back of the house, and then walk up and see the front of the house, you could easily make the determination it was 2 separate houses. It's just not consistent through the whole plan. And then, as Commissioner Hutt mentioned on finding 8F, I thought that is a plan not required for. I know that there's an arborist report, but
Preliminary,
Yeah.
a preliminary landscape plan, I
Yeah,
thought
preliminary
was- I thought
landscape
was
plan.
one of the
But
requirements.
they are required, but just deferred, the applicant choose to defer the.
okay. Well, so I think that we might want to recommend undeferring that so that we can have an easier time of making that finding. So it sounds like there is some consensus that we might want to see some changes before we're able to make all these findings. So there are a couple of choices here. We can continue it to a date certain, which means that there's no renoticing needs, and you tell us what date, and we'll check it on the calendar, and you guys can come back then and finish presenting. You can move it to a date uncertain, which means that when you're ready to come back, you go ahead and set that up. Those are the 2 plans I recommend at this juncture. If you want to come up to the microphone and let us know if either of those are amenable.
So, yeah, I guess I'm kind of, the changes that are being suggested, I'm completely open to. It wasn't, we were trying to stay right like an inch under. That's the way it ended up with the joist plan that the joist company gave me.
Yeah.
If that was 14 feet, we're fine with that. So I guess I just, maybe some direction on the change, because I kind of see you want more materials on the sides and the back that match the front. So you want brick or maybe the horizontal siding. And then the roof line is, as far as the basement placement, the pool's back there. So that was like,
That's up to you, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
think
not part of the,
that's not
it was
part
just
of
a
our.
suggestion
Gotcha.
for better.
That,
yeah.
that was a free of charge recommendation.
oh,
My personal recommendation is take some of that. I would make an even bigger basement and put any extra space you need down there so that we can get it up out of what people see. We love basements. Put everything in the basement here. It's free space. You don't get charged for it. It's the best. We love basements.
It's not free, you pay for it.
right.
From a planning perspective, it's free.
Digging a 14, 15-foot hole. That's
Yeah,
what you're doing.
yeah, but it's free floor coverage, right? So, we love the basements. Yeah, we're so thrilled that it's a lot of people wait till they have a really small lot to try to use that space. I think that this is a great way to do it. But so I think if I'm recapping correctly, and commissioners keep me honest, it's just as you mentioned, making sure that that attention to detail we saw in the front carries all the way around. However you choose to do that, I think it sounds like you have some ideas on that. I think that we're looking to lower the, how high some of the roof lines are, because that really contributes to the bulking and massing that is bigger than a lot of your neighbors.
Okay.
Is there other solid recommendations we can give here?
No, I think that, continuing around is, I think the issue is you've got a lot more on the front than the sides, and I think you could accomplish that by putting more on the sides and the back, or taking away from the front, or some combination of those to try to get a more cohesive look. It's not necessarily one way or the other. That's really,
Gotcha. So maybe eliminating the horizontal and leaving it all board and batten,
Well,
as opposed to.
I mean, if you're looking at the front, the three elements that you're looking at are material changes, right, that you have going on, but you also have different roofs sort of playing with each other, right? I mean, you have the smaller roof and the larger roof,
Right.
so there's that sort of contrast, right? But then you also are looking at the plano difference that you're looking at this thing. So taking all those three elements and then wrapping it all the way around, then you'll have more of a cohesive connection between all of that. I'm not saying just take the, board and batten and just wrap the whole thing all and now it's continuing. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for this level of detail that you're taking into it. Take that around. It's your house. It's your dream house. You're going to have this thing for what, 20, 40, 50, 60 years, whatever. Make it nice,
So maybe
Make
you
it as good
don't,
as the
I think
front.
what I'm hearing is maybe you don't just want it to go straight back next to the driveway, maybe add some articulation in there the same way you have up front. Is that what you're saying would help make it more
And that's
continuous?
what I would recommend to make the house sort of this big, nice cohesive place, yeah.
Yeah. So is that good guidance?
That's guidance, thank you.
It's guidance, absolutely, and ultimately, you'll have to make those decisions. It's easy for us to recommend dollars we don't have to pay, but,
Yeah. To get back to your question, I think I don't have a date, because I don't know how long that redesign, it's been quite a process, so I'm gonna go back to the drawing board on some of that, and
I just would like to mention, we have really big walls on all sides. So in designing it, we decided to put more of our money into the front because we want to respect our neighbors, respect our community, and we thought that we'd keep it more simple and streamlined in the back. Is it ideal? No. But we thought because we were following the guidelines that it was a safe bet to save some money there, and that's something we could later on add to. So we were hoping to get approved so we could start by summer. So I don't know if that helps you understand why we chose to keep things as simple in the back, because we didn't think it would affect our neighbors. We didn't think it would affect the community. And so I am a little disappointed we can't get approved tonight. I just don't want you to think that we were being lazy. It was really a matter of being strategic with our money. And
absolutely. And I think that it's not, you couldn't point at just one thing. You could come back to us and have changed the bulk and massing such that it's smaller and we can get past, or it's been changed sufficiently that we're not as worried about the continuous plan all the way around. There's not one silver bullet here. You've got to figure out what works for you and your plan that will also help us alleviate enough of what we voiced here tonight to approve it. Does that make sense?
yeah. So we can't just try a date? No, not yet. Okay. So a date for,
Okay, so you'd like to continue it to a date uncertain?
yes.
we're gonna have to.
Okay.
Do they have to renotice?
Yeah, for a date uncertain, you have to renotice.
Okay, that's, because that's a cost consideration as well. If you push it out enough, but I guess you really want to get by summer, right?
We really wanted to start this summer, and yeah.
With the basement, ideally, obviously staying away from any
Rain.
potential chance of rain was the
We
idea.
have
That's right.
to.
That's right.
It's like, how far can we push? I mean, is it 2 months is okay, or it's not like next month, right? I just don't know if I can have it all done.
No,
we can set
Just a date certain, we just
Yeah.
need to have it, if we have a date certain, then there's no renotice
Okay.
requirements.
Yeah, I mean, can we
And
do
so-
2 months? Is that?
Yeah, 2 months, do you have a meeting for us in 2 months, Claire?
So the
I'm
next
sorry.
available date in April would be April 6th, the first meeting, or the second meeting is April 20th.
Yeah, the 6th works.
All right,
Sorry, I misunderstood. Thank you.
perfect, yeah. We always want to make sure that, yeah,
Appreciate it.
That's great,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you for
That'll
your
save you
feedback.
renoticing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I will entertain a motion.
Okay, I'll move approval to continue this project until the April 6th meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, yeah, go
I'll
ahead.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. All right, next up, we have a discussion on Municipal Code Text Amendment, MCTA 22-06, an ordinance amending Chapter 17.22, accessory dwelling units, of the Sierra Madre Municipal Code to conform to state housing law. Planner Lynn, do you have a presentation for us?
So for the next item, we have a Word document and we can do live edit instead of a presentation.
What's your favorite?
Are we, just a point of clarification, this is discussion, so do we need to bring this back to a public hearing?
Yes, we do.
Thank you, commissioners. Just opening this up for discussion, I just wanted to start right away with live edits. But to introduce this, I will summarize what the state law does. First,
Associate Planner Wolf, do you have a microphone so that they can hear you?
yes, I should.
Perfect. Sorry, I couldn't see it.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So the Assembly Bills 2221 and Senate Bills 897. Of note, what they are doing to the ADU law is first eliminating front yard setback requirements for certain ADUs. Those would be ADUs that qualify as exemptions, being 800 square feet or less, 4 feet setback from side and rear, or not rear in this case because it would be front, and a limit of height to 16 feet. Moving on to height, that is also changing. For detached single-family or multifamily ADUs, that is remaining 16 feet, but it's getting a little bit more lenient for ADUs which are in a half-mile distance from a major transit stop or high-quality transit corridor, from 16 to 18 feet, and allowing an additional 2 feet for a total of 20 feet for pitched groups.
And we don't have any of those
Yeah,
transit
do
stops
we-
in town, right?
We do not have any transit stops or high-quality transit corridors, so this would not apply, but this is in our code just in case we happen to get one in the future.
Yep. That's subway line. Sierra Madre subway.
2064.
Next is the detached ADU and for multi-story and multifamily. That is now being allowed at 18 feet. And an attached ADU can now be 25 feet and matching the existing residence to which it is attached. Staff is making further recommendations for amendments. It's just bullet pointed here. First, for procedural clarity, consistent with state laws, that's more on the process side of things. Amendment for clarification to certain development standards, because also consistent with state laws. This has to do with fire sprinklers. We wanted to add a new section for informational purposes, and this has to do with how a lot of applicants we get tend to think that, or tend to want to add an ADU first, have that built, live in it, and then do additions to their home. But there's a misconception that an ADU at all times is non-existent from floor area requirements. However, what we're trying to convey, what we try to explain to everyone, is that the ADU is not always non-existent from floor area requirements. It is only exempt from the floor area requirements when it is proposed. So it is always recommended that the applicant do their ADU as a last phase in improvement for their property. And that's what this section essentially does, is for information as that. There's an amendment for expansion on application review procedures, and this also includes application review submittal requirements. And it's also recommended to add a new section for an appeal procedure. And then just some general cleanup and enhanced legibility and formatting.
And just so I'm clear, are we going to actually look at editing those live? Okay, great.
Moving on right into it.
Perfect.
So this is the first section. I just spoke about how we wanted to inform the community that essentially the ADU should be the last phase of a project.
I have a general question on this. I think this is useful information to applicants, so they don't get, you know, sort of confused about how the process works. But do you have a concern that HCD might look at this as if we're trying to discourage people from making ADUs?
I personally see this as a way to encourage people to exceed in their gross floor area requirements.
Okay.
Alternatively, so I think it has two sides to a coin.
Yeah, I mean, we could of course just fix this problem by changing our floor area rules so that they're a little bit lower and they don't include the 800 square feet of an ADU. But given, given maybe some other people don't want to do that, I think this is a helpful advisory thing, and I don't have any comments on the text. And I also think the example footnotes are very helpful.
Yeah, I really like the example footnotes. I thought those were great.
Thank you. Is there any recommendation for edits to new section 1722.015?
Nope, no edits.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, I guess not. Just I hate the way government language sounds. You know, by the time you get done, you're almost more confused.
I know, you have to read it like 10 times and
Yeah.
you still don't understand.
Yeah, the garage 2 units go away. It's like, does that mean I don't have to have, parking?
So there's just a small edit here. I think this was primarily to be consistent with state law. And this has mostly to do with manufactured homes, manufactured ADUs in this case.
Which state law has now said are absolutely allowed.
State law has essentially said, at least since 2020, that manufactured homes and modular dwelling units which are mounted to a permanent location, are allowed as accessory dwelling units. And now it just specifies that it can also be allowed when the primary home is also a manufactured home or modular dwelling unit.
Okay, doesn't appear to have any edits.
Moving on to fire sprinkler requirements. This again is just clarification from the state that we wanted to include. It isn't particularly required, but we wanted to include that just in case we were, for example, to be audited in any way.
Yeah, so I have a question. Because it seems like, as written, that if you are constructing an accessory dwelling unit, that you do not need fire sprinklers.
Correct.
Right, unless they already have them in the main house or.
Right. I think we should strike all of that and just require them in every single ADU. I can't come up with a single reason why we would not want to put fire sprinklers in new construction, A, and B, the state laws always have carve-outs for life safety, so they wouldn't be able to come back at us.
So you're saying that if there's a single-family residence that doesn't have sprinklers currently, and they want to do an ADU in the back one needs to have sprinklers?
Yep. I think all new construction should have
'Cause that means
sprinklers.
Changing out your main water line, changing out your size, upgrading to that, trenching all the way back to that, that's a lot of cost,
Okay.
so.
It's even more expensive to lose a life that could have been prevented from sprinklers.
Chair Dennison, I generally agree with you. However, state does limit us from requiring fire sprinklers in all new construction for accessory dwelling units. That is not the case for primary dwelling units, or I'm sorry, primary homes, residences. But if one was proposed with a new primary residence and an ADU, and because the primary residence would require a fire sprinkler, it would then be able to be required in the ADU.
Right.
However, when an ADU is proposed alone and the primary residence does not have fire sprinklers, the city cannot require, unless there's some other reason to, and for example, we have done that in the past where, for example, there's an accessibility for life safety purposes. The ADU can be, or where it's more than 150 feet away from the front property line, the fire marshal has stated that the city can require fire sprinklers in that instance.
So the fire marshal reviews every one of these?
That is correct.
I just need to take the guy to lunch. Is that what I'm hearing? No. So we're constantly told that everything above Grandview is a high fire zone. Extreme high fire. Thank you. Extreme high fire zone. So can we say that in areas that are an extreme high fire zone, that it is mandated for life safety purposes?
No.
I need an official opinion on this.
I'll defer the question to our city attorney.
Yes, so the new state law under AB 2221 adds that the construction of an ADU can't trigger a requirement for fire sprinklers in the primary dwelling unit and has no exemption to it.
Right, but that's not what I'm asking for.
Yeah, what about?
I'm asking for the, and that's the way I read it, exactly. It says that you can't require it in the primary, and I'm fine with that. We're not talking about construction in the primary. I'm saying, in the ADU, I want them to have to do it.
The law before AB 2221 also prohibited and continues to prohibit an requirement to provide fire sprinklers if they are not required for the primary residence. And there's also no exemption for that.
Yeah.
So if it's required for the primary residence, then we can require for the ADU as well.
So all new construction in the primary residence would require sprinklers. So in the ADU, all new construction would also require sprinklers. So we should be able to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right, and as long as it's not a trigger because of the construction of the ADU, I think that's right. If there's any new construction,
So they have to build the whole thing new, basically is what it boils down to.
There's also a distinction though for if the existing house has sprinklers and you're adding the junior ADU, which is attached to that house, then you have to do sprinklers because it's attached to it.
No, we can require it
Oh,
for,
we can
for
even
even detached.
detached, yeah.
Because it says ADU or junior ADU.
But most junior ADUs are attached, I think,
Right.
to this residence, right?
Yeah, but we can require it for both.
Okay.
As long as the primary has or is required to have, then we can require the ADU, but
right?
Because it doesn't say anything about whether or not
I don't know.
it's
If it's-
conforming.
If it's a precondition, if the primary dwelling unit already has the condition that it must have fire sprinklers, then the ADU can also be required to have fire sprinklers.
So that would be new, because I think under the current one, you're not required.
The new addition is that the construction of the ADU where the primary dwelling unit doesn't require fire sprinklers, the construction of the ADU can't trigger a fire sprinkler
Back to the
requirement
house,
in
yeah.
the primary dwelling unit.
Right, which is not what I'm looking for, yeah.
Which
So-
is not what you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm looking for so it sounds like we're still clear. So maybe, I know that this is just the first time discussion, so maybe city attorney can take a look at this and see what the enforceable line
yeah,
is
I
on
think the other
sprinklers.
question is, if the fire marshal reviews every one of these, what leeway does the fire marshal have to say this? I mean, can the fire marshal say everything in extreme high fire zone needs these?
I'm not sure what the answer is to that, but I can look into it for the next agenda item when this is agendized again. I have a question for you. If you are interested in requiring fire sprinklers in all primary dwelling units in every zone of the city or particular zones?
Well, I personally think it should be in every zone.
Right, I mean, they're protecting from within, not usually from the outside. But
I'm a big proponent
might be
of fire
a way to get 'em,
sprinklers.
yeah.
But for
I am
new
too.
constructions, you're saying?
Yes,
Okay.
it would be all new
All right.
constructions.
Well,
So
I
currently.
think
the-
all new construction has to have fire sprinklers anyway, right?
Right,
Yeah.
so the current quota is new construction, or if you're adding more than 50%, right, is triggered. Okay.
There's one more, if there's a remodel to the existing primary residence of 70% or more of its existing floor
Seven.
area.
I didn't hear
Or remodel,
70
okay, okay.
something.
Not just adding, okay,
Yeah.
got it.
So if it's more than 70% change to the primary structure, then they have to retrofit
That
the,
makes sense.
the addition with, yeah,
Correct.
yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, I
it
wouldn't-
sounds like there may be a needle to thread there, so maybe you can,
We can bring this back for the next hearing, but
Yeah,
it,
thank you.
it does seem plausible.
Okay, thank you.
One moment.
Any other discussion, or is that horse pretty well?
Yeah?
Yep. Thank you.
There we go. It's gonna be much easier for me to do it this way.
Moving the multiple TV screens there. Oh, I see we're getting a note.
Okay, this one was just a misreference to a section of the code that we don't have for dispensable space. Instead, it's to chapter 8.36 for hazardous brush clearance. And that's the closest we have to defensible space at this time.
What does that say?
Yeah, what,
I didn't read it.
do you have chapter 836?
We do have chapter 836. We did not have, actually, section 15.32030.
Oh, that didn't exist?
It did exist, but it referenced swimming pools, so that was not an
Oh.
appropriate reference.
Well, that'll stop fires, that's good.
Jump in the pool.
So this is really just a quick cleanup item.
Pool with the scuba tank, the fire.
Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah, that's fine.
The next is height, as explained above. Prior to this code amendment, really all it stated was, except as provided in paragraph 2, that the height shall not exceed 16 feet. That's expanded so that we have each of those categories as tabled out in the summary above. And this is just a really long way to say high-quality transit corridor.
Yep.
And then I also wanted to include this section that it is not construed to allow an accessory dwelling unit to exceed 2 stories in the event that would be interpreted where matching an attached accessory dwelling unit is to an existing 3-story structure, as such a structure exists.
Yeah, I have a question for you on number 4. Multifamily, multi-story. Does a 2-story single-family house with an ADU count as multifamily, multi-story? Because according to our design review rules, that counts as multifamily and we can't do design review on it. So if you're putting an ADU on a single-family house, you'd never get to the one up there because it's always multifamily.
So I'm going to defer this question to our city attorney because there are multiple ways, I think, to interpret this, and I'd like the most official and correct way.
So you're saying, Commissioner Hutt, a single-family, you were saying a multifamily house with an ADU attached?
Well, under the this HCD's interpretation of when we can do design review, which we follow, a single-family house with ADU is considered multifamily, and so we can't do design review. And so here you've got in number 4, detached accessory dwelling unit on a lot with existing or proposed multifamily, multi-story dwelling. The height shall not exceed 18. So if I've got a 2-story single-family house with an ADU, that's multifamily, multi-story, right? So I'd be at 18. Now if you go up to number, 2, that's, oh no, I'm sorry, the 16-foot number 1, that's where you have a single-family house. But you can't have a single-family house if you're putting an ADU, according to basically the way the state housing looks at things.
Yeah, would you change it to maybe, instead of just lot, the type of lot, R2 or R3 versus R1?
Well, you could just strike or proposed, is that what you're?
I'm not even trying to fix it, I'm just trying to understand
No,
first.
I know, I agree with you, because we see this happening.
And I mean, it's only 2 feet difference, so does it effectively mean you can build all ADUs to 18 feet in town? I guess unless you have a 1-story house and it's 16 feet,
Yeah.
I guess that's not that horrible of an outcome.
Gives you a chance to make a nice big attic.
Big attic.
Hidden space. Maybe that's not a bad thing.
So I guess they'll get back to us on
Yeah.
Yeah.
potential
I'll get
proposed
back
wording
to
for
you.
that. Great, thank you.
That one.
All right, we can probably move on.
So I think this is more language added by the state.
Well, can it be an accessory dwelling unit if there's not already a unit on the main house on it?
No, so accessory will always need to be subordinate to a primary dwelling.
But you can't have an ADU without a house, but you can build them at the same time.
Right. But I guess, just like the last section, right? You can't have a permit for an accessory dwelling unit to create a new single-family dwelling. You already have to have a single-family dwelling in order to then have an accessory.
You can't put them at the same time.
Yeah, no, you're doing them at the same time, that's right. Permit application for ADU with a permit application to create a new. Maybe the word "to create" is confusing, because we say application for ADU, or we say permit application for a new single-family or multifamily. Because we switch from for to create, and we're really saying the same thing, so we should say it the same way.
For,
Yeah, yeah.
instead of
Yeah,
to
because the
create.
application is for, rather than
Yeah, just use
creating.
for, yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we move on?
So
Yep.
okay, new, okay. New is good.
So here is, I discussed this with City Attorney Yurgosian, whether or not to strike this front yard setback requirement, and it was recommended that we do strike this front yard setback requirement.
So you can just put it like right up on the curb?
Yes, apparently.
That's what state law has
Yeah.
recently changed.
No,
That's
There's no,
so you can put the ADU in your front yard, right at the curb?
yeah, there's one in Grandview.
Makes it easier to deliver a modular, just
Yeah, that's
offload
right.
it off the truck and stick it right on the foundation.
Shipping container. Why don't you fix it to the ground?
Yeah.
In our government.
okay.
This amendment is just to clarify that garages that are attached to existing primary dwellings are considered within the existing existing single-family residence. This clarification comes from HCD.
So the junior has to be attached or part of the primary.
That
So
is
if there's a detached garage and you attach the ADU to the garage that's detached from the primary, and it's still a detached ADU.
That would not qualify for a junior ADU.
Yeah.
So what's missing from this definition is a door to the outside, an exterior door. Isn't it required to be a junior? It has to have a door to the exterior?
I think C has it.
Okay.
C has the,
Included an entrance separate from
Okay.
the main entrance. So this is a lot of redlining, but really all it does is break out these Romanettes into paragraphs. This is for legibility.
Yep.
This is just to make reference to the height amendments above.
mm.
This amendment comes from language provided by the state law. This insertion of the word existing is, again, from state law for clarification purposes. And this is just another reference to the development standards that include fire sprinklers. This Part D is deleted because we had it already in a section for rental restriction. We already had the section for application review, but I took the liberty and made suggestion to amend it so that we have all of these application requirements codified. This is current practice, by the way, so we already do require this for all applications.
That's good. Normally, I'd be a little concerned about putting this kind of stuff in code, but we update this code every year, so.
I'm already looking forward to next year.
Yeah, I am too.
Stop me if I'm going too fast, or you want to make any edits.
No, it's all good with all this.
Yep, this all look good. Proposed landscape plan, right there.
Would you like to insert any edits to this part? Okay.
Nope.
This procedure section was already in place. It's just broken out to be in separate paragraphs for legibility.
So even for an ADU, they have to turn in all of those same requirements?
Yes, we wanted to have a full exhaustive list that we can parse down on a project-by-project basis. For example, conversion would not require every single one of those things. But we wanted to codify something that we could say, you know, and state is further limiting us as we move on from being unable to ask for additional materials that is not otherwise stated. So we wanted to have as many
Great.
requirements as possible and just omit what's not applicable to certain projects. So this isn't just paired out in separate paragraphs. This is a procedure also provided by the state where it has strict timeline requirements. Essentially says that the city has to make some kind of a decision or a written notification of a complete or incomplete application. For incomplete, the city's practice is to refer to an incomplete application, which the state refers to as a denied application. But we wanted to stay away from harsh language like that. So at the bottom here, it just says for the purpose of the subsection, incomplete has the same meaning as denied. And section C here is more language provided by the state that we are recommending be inserted. This just has to do with demolition permit requirements.
So, Josh, that would just mean they'd have to come before us for a demolition permit, but then they just put a square there for whatever they're doing for the ADU, and we have nothing to say about it, correct?
Really, all this does is expedite a demolition permit. Right now, it has a 30-day procedure where we typically start that at the end or where a plan check has been approved. And this expedites that so that that 30-day waiting period can start at the beginning of a plan check process review.
Okay.
All right, moving on to rental restrictions. So we're keeping the restriction from accessory dwelling units as short-term rentals. And we're further adding that anyone wishing to rent the accessory dwelling unit must obtain an annual business license in compliance with Title V.
There's not an HCD prohibition on that?
So the state provides that cities may have this rental restriction, but doesn't require that cities shall do this.
Is the language in A that says it shall be rented mean you can't use it owner occupant?
It does say that, so we can amend this language so that it doesn't require the accessory dwelling unit to be rented. That's not the intent.
Just it's the longer than 30 days.
That's a good point.
Well, yeah, keeps you from making a,
Yeah, so for terms no less than 30 days, for terms no less than 30 days.
So,
some kind of Airbnb.
So an accessory dwelling unit or junior
Yeah.
accessory dwelling unit may be rented for terms of no less than 30 days.
What if we add a new sentence allowing ADUs and JADUs to be rented and then say any rental shall be for no longer than 30 days?
Does all work?
No less than.
No less than, yeah. Yeah.
Changing the words up there is confusing. Longer or lesser than.
Less
31
like-
days
there's a less
versus
than
30 or more.
Accessory dwelling unit shall be rented for terms longer.
Yeah, okay, short-term rental, so that's the 30 day.
So you don't have to rent it, but it shall be rented for, yeah, okay.
and then the addition of an appeal section was recommended by staff as well with direction from legal counsel. And that concludes all of the amendments to accessory dwelling units.
So
Depends.
is the appeal process, I mean, if they have 14 days to appeal and then we don't meet for another meeting cycle, that could be another 21 days, so we're up to 36 days, right? So is that consistent with the timelines that they have in state law?
The timeline is 60 days for approval or disapproval. The planning commission could do special meetings.
Well, I guess if they would only be appealing it not being approved.
Right.
So they would have received the decision in a timely fashion. Is there a state law regarding appeals of a decision?
I believe it does apply to appeals as well, the 60 days.
So if we denied it on day 59 of the process, then it would automatically get approved if they appealed it on day 60?
Sweet deal. But can neighbors appeal an approval? The appeal is for both options, right? Or is it only the applicant that can appeal a denial?
Yeah, if I could defer it to
I
legal counsel.
believe there are no appeals for other residents?
Guess we'd have to look at 176115.
Doesn't that just say that it may be appealed within 14 days?
Yeah, but the
There-
concern is
there's- yeah.
state law compliance.
State law has very well-defined
Oh.
timelines that the whole process has to be done in.
Yeah, oh, okay.
So
That
we
makes
just have to verify if it's the 60-day, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if the, John brings up, sorry, Commissioner Hutt brings up a great point that, that I think our appeals process does allow us to appeal approvals as well, which would then put it out. If you get denied, unless state law says otherwise, that's the end of the process and it's happened within the timeline.
So I'm not seeing a direct answer in the code, so I will also put that on my list of things to get back to you.
Okay. And, yeah, we should also look at 176115 to see if it does allow for the appeal of an approval. We might want to change that to not apply to ADUs.
Well, I think we need to know if the 60 days applies first. Because if it does, it sort of, an appeals,
And appeals,
yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
it practically won't happen.
Right.
Okay. I guess we should take public comment on this. At this time, we will invite anybody who would like to provide public comment on this agendized item to come before us.
In regards to this last comment, last segment?
Todd Conrad, 561 Foothill Avenue, here in town. Having been a member of the fire department with you as well, Mr. Dennison, I wholeheartedly agree with any supportive measure to move ahead with fire sprinklers. And if it triggers such things that, if we could trigger such things to retrofit homes, I would be wholly in favor of it. I did a remodel on my house, an addition, mind you, this is 20 years ago, and I even considered cutting my addition back to be less than 50% so that I wouldn't be required to put the fire sprinklers in. And of course, I had a friendly conversation with a fire marshal who was a good friend of mine, and he basically asked me, what are you thinking? Because of the cost incurred at that time was only $4,300 on a several $100,000 project. I think the percentage of expense for something like this, the public needs to be aware how little they can have sprinklers installed for, and the dramatic effect that we've seen in several physical demonstrations that we did here in town on vacated houses. It's amazing the difference fire sprinklers can make. So, if nothing else, I'm fully in support of anything that pushes fire sprinklers in homes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, we'll bring this back to Commission. Any last comments on this?
I think staff did a great job on this. There's a lot of confusing moving parts, and it was really well done. So kudos to staff on this.
Thank you.
And I appreciate council and staff's willingness to listen to our crazy ideas on how to get the most out of we can with our code, so thank you.
Makes it fun.
Thank you.
All right. Was that both discussion points combined into one, or do we still have the second one? For general ordinance cleanup. Okay,
We still have the second item.
great. So staff have a presentation on the municipal code text amendment and general ordinance cleanup.
Staff have the same Word document and the red line text.
Let's start with a summary of the general cleanup here. So there's a lot of cleanup in this round of ordinance cleanup items. So I'd like to just summarize. First, there's clarification on language. The R313 angle plane requirement. Staff took this to discussion with the Planning Commission last November. This has to do with clarification to the angle plane standards with deviation established to a fixed point of reference as required by standards for setbacks in R313 zone. The next is for design review permit findings. We wanted to clarify that whether findings can be satisfied should be based on the final decision rather than contents of the application at any point or iteration in the application submittal. Third, we wanted to specify that the minimum dimensions of a parking space pertain to a surface parking lot spaces. And wherever, this is the bulk of, and why there's 300 pages of this, is wherever development services is mentioned, this is no longer a department of the city. It is replaced with planning and community preservation. And this is just how that was achieved. Just to delete everything that says development services and replace it with planning and community preservation. And this does range throughout the whole, not just Title 17, but the whole of the municipal code. And then there's further clarification of intent, additional language specifying the measurements of garages, that the clearance applies to the interior. So for example, a 20 by 20 garage no longer would apply to the building, but rather to the interior clearance of that building. We wanted to also expressly state in the hillside residential zone that the parking referred to in the single family must be covered.
Yeah, we're not gonna go through line by line on this one, right? Because there's like hundreds of pages.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll raise the questions here. On the covered, we previously, well, step a couple times back. We had covered requirement in the parking code. When we updated the parking code, we thought it'd be better to put it in the underlying zones. And then so we went and put it into the R1, right? That's where we're at now. And so what we're saying here is in RH, we're saying it needs to be covered as well.
We just don't want it to be misconstrued that it wouldn't otherwise be not required
Right.
in RH.
And in RC, the canyon, it's not required, and it's very clear about that. But what about R2 and R3?
So when I last brought this cleanup item for covered spaces in R2,
We punted.
it was not recommended that we make that change.
Okay.
And R3 already has that, doesn't need any amendment for covered parking spaces.
Okay, so then if we just do RH, we're covered. Okay. Covered. That's not the right word. We're finished.
I had another question. From a drafting perspective, should we just define a term so that when your department name changes again, that we don't have to change the code? Is that an option? I mean, could we define what is it? It's development services in here?
That would work if it was, if in the definitions, development services was defined as planning.
Latest
Planning.
name, insert.
Yeah, and then
I know, the thing is, the switch from the name was a big, like, symbolic thing for the city, so, I don't know.
okay.
You know, like
So
search
there is a
district, quick and
definition
clear,
in
right?
Title 17, but there's no overarching definition in the remainder of the municipal code. So it would still need to be changed. There's references to development services without definition there too. And the rest-
Okay.
I like where your mind was going, though.
I wish that was the case.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's just correction to code references. We wanted to replace all references to R3 with the new zone designation of R3-13. And then further include where applicable R3-20 and R3-30. We wanted to replace all residential professional with the now designation residential entrepreneur. There's corrections to various incorrect or broken references. This is in these listed sections here. highlight those. Those are all where there's incorrect references.
There's also, when we get to it in 1736-020, which is the list of uses in the commercial code, there's footnotes that are broken, that have code references that don't work. So maybe we can look at that.
So 17.36.
17.36.020.
And in general development standards for permissible projections, we wanted to add setback, that they're allowed in the setback area for R313. This is just for clarification purposes that architectural elements such as eaves and other details would be allowed to encroach into the angle plane, or setbacks rather. Then there's some formatting for legibility. This 1760-030 is the list of conditionally allowed uses. We just wanted to reorganize this so it doesn't break apart when you're reading it on Municode or whatever format the city has for its online services. And in parking code, we just wanted to break out the Romanettes into a list of items. And for other changes, there was recommended added language intended to be a catch-all for the appeal process for director determinations. And then to definitions, there is such a secretary of the planning commission. Where it's not assigned to, it would be fulfilled by a city staff person.
Be the secretary, John.
And then for some odd reason, the amendments by ordinance 1431 to some definitions, this has to do with the commercial code update. They just weren't captured, so we're intending to recapture those amendments.
Yeah, and those in particular I didn't see in your resolution. I saw the resolution on secretary. Maybe I just missed it, but the main commercial street and the prime storefront area, I didn't see those being added. And so the one that you attached at the end of the full code, it has those, but they're not online. And then there's also one issue with the definition of the attached of the main commercial street, which just says Baldwin and Sierra Madre Boulevard, but it doesn't include the part of East Montecito. Because you remember the commercial code applies to East Montecito as well. And so it should also add, and the westerly 2/3 of East Montecito Avenue between Baldwin Avenue and Mountain Trail.
Did we change that away from the manufacturing?
No, it's because the commercial codes apply there, and
It's underlying.
and this is mostly used for defining the prime storefront area where the parking is different. So you want the parking to be the prime storefront for that part, and then it also, in the broken footnotes on the use chart, is where we say you can't do residential in the prime storefront. And so under the code right now, you could put residential right on the front in Montecito or in the commercial zone. So we want to clean that up. Yeah, I see those footnotes. Yeah, so these code references were to an earlier draft, and then they got amended, and then these footnotes never got updated. So, and I don't know, we'll have to go back and look at some of the drafts to see which ones of those we want to maintain or just delete. But at a minimum, for footnote 3 that's residential, we need to say that residential uses aren't allowed in the prime storefront area. Because otherwise we're inconsistent with the general plan.
I will discuss that. I would like to discuss that with legal counsel. There's other state laws that I don't know if would prohibit such an addition to the code. Now, there's recent state law that allows by right residential in commercial zone.
Okay, but the problem is our general plan doesn't allow residential on the ground floor in the front, right? It has to be above or behind. So, yeah, I don't think people want people putting houses on Sierra Madre Boulevard, right, in the middle of town, so.
Consistent, yeah.
And Commissioner Hutt, you mentioned there was another misreference to commercial street in definitions?
Yeah, in the definition, the general definition, 1708020, the definitions of main commercial street and prime storefront area, maybe you've added them in this part, but I didn't see them added in the resolution.
So I'll primarily be working off of this document to ensure that the ordinance and resolution are consistent with this document.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so this main commercial street, so that should say, means Sierra Madre Boulevard, comma, Baldwin Avenue, and then we should have,
two-thirds.
and the westerly 2/3 of East Montecito Avenue, between Baldwin Avenue and Mountain Trail.
I was taking this definition straight from the ordinance as approved by City Council, so I'm not sure why this language was not there.
Well, I think the thought was probably that we're doing the commercial, but there wasn't the consideration given that this goes into parking and that the commercial is allowed in East Montecito. And so perhaps we should have cleaned this up when we did the East Montecito cleanup, but you still have the problem of you're gonna have inaccurate parking and you're gonna allow residential, you know, right where the brewery is.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, you've got the prime storefront area there, so that, to the extent they're not included in the resolution, they just need to be put in.
Okay, I'll make sure that's consistent.
Commissioner Hutt, I believe the primary storefront has already been adopted.
Mhm.
It just, it's not codified in our code online.
So recapturing all of those definitions is the last element of the cleanup items. And I just wanted to briefly go over what's not being considered for ordinance cleanup. And that would be changes to the discretionary demolition process. The Planning Commission previously stated that they wanted to study this in further detail. Changes to the R2 code are much too comprehensive for a simple cleanup. And then we've already gone over this, but there was an incorrect reference found in chapter 17.22 referring to swimming pools instead of defensible space. And that concludes the cleanup items. So if we want to go back to this document and you have any concerns, this is just a discussion, it's not a public hearing, so we don't have to take any action tonight.
A couple other things I wanted to talk about in the list that's not in cleanup, but I think we really need to get to, and I think we wanted to have a discussion about this, is the fact that in both R3 and in the commercial code, we have design review permit, which are always in R3 and sometimes in commercial, not state law prohibits us from doing that. And so we need to think about a fix to have, you know, perhaps more objective criteria if we're not going to be able to do subjective review. So, you know, like last time we saw the plate height issue, and there's some other things like that we could address. And the other thing I think it would be useful in that discussion is if council could review if we have fair and objective just building criteria that people could, you know, that aren't fake, that's make it so you can't build anything, but you could actually build stuff. But then if somebody wants to build something bigger than that, you know, like they want plate height 10 feet for some reason, if we could approve that through subjective design review, or can we not even do that?
I'll look into that as well.
I'll defer to the commission's pleasure whether they would like to go line by line or hit certain points that they have concerns on.
Does anybody want to go line by line, or can we review these separately next time we see them?
Yeah, I reviewed all of chapter 17. I didn't look at any of the other chapters because you're just changing the names of the department. And except for the few things that I mentioned, I'm good with all the changes.
Anybody else? Nope. All right. I think we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we can move on to Planning Commission reports. Do any planning commissioners have anything to report?
Sorry, Commissioner, do you want to take public comment?
I sure do. At this time, we will take public comment on the municipal code text amendment, general ordinance cleanup, if anybody would like to speak to that agendized item. Seeing nobody, we will bring this back, thank you, to Planning Commission reports. Do any planning commissioners have anything to report?
I know one thing, the houses at 1 Carter that we approved through design review are now finished, or 4 of them, or 3 of them, 3 or 4, are finished and for sale, and there's open houses. I didn't get to go to one last weekend, but I think there's one this upcoming weekend, so I'm looking forward to going to that just to see what they look like when built after, in comparison to the plans that we approved.
Just an announcement. I've been up on the trail, and I think the private sector wins over the public sector here. The bridge for the fallen part of our Mount Wilson Trail has been fixed, and it's passable. I've been all the way to First Water and back several times. Looks good. So my compliments to a former commission member for getting that done. And if you care to donate to the Fletcher Fund, it would be much appreciated, because they could probably use the funds for the future. It's always good to have them there but it's great. Anyway.
I would like to welcome our newest commissioner, Commissioner Yu, to the commission.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Expecting great things from you. And at least
We'll see.
2 terms. All right. With that, we'll turn it over to the Planning and Community Preservation Department reports. Planner Lynn.
Chair. So at the last City Council meeting on January 24th, City Council received and filed the Housing Element Annual Progress Report for the year 2022, and I have provided you with a copy on the dais for your review and receive and file. And it shows our housing production progress and our progress with the assigned RENA number. Our next meeting is February 16th. We'll be reviewing 346 Foothill Avenue. It's coming back to us. It's a design review permit with the ADU attached. And we'll also hear from our city attorney regarding legislative updates. And also, we will review a list of commission suggestions for discussion. Just to let you know that February 14, Alverno Heights Academy has appealed to the Planning Commission decision, and the City Council will be reviewing that application.
An appeal to the Planning Commission. Which decision are they appealing?
The Alverno Master Plan.
And was that, Alverno is approving or appealing, or the neighbors?
It's a neighbor.
The neighbor is
Neighbor, okay.
appealing.
Yeah,
Okay.
It didn't make sense to me why Alverno would appeal approval, but you never know.
All right.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything else for the good of the order? All right, then I will go ahead and adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.